Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Billi.
I'm Zara.
Last week, you may have seen the press conference Elon Musk held in the White House next to the US President Donald Trump and also his son, X. If you saw that on your TikTok feeds and you were wondering what that was all about, you have come to the right place. It's been nearly 1 month since Trump was inaugurated and Elon Musk commenced his official role as part of the Trump administration. We now know a little more about what Musk's new government advisory body, the Department of Government Efficiency, will look like. So we thought it would be the perfect time to explain Elon Musk's role in the Trump administration.
Billi, there are very few people who compete with Donald Trump for the number of headlines they can get in a week. But I do believe that Elon Musk is probably a very close second. And so I don't think that he necessarily needs a full introduction. But for anyone that might not be overly familiar, what do we need to know about Elon Musk?
So he is the richest person in the world. He's number one above Bill Gates, above Mark Zuckerberg, number one richest person in the world. Zara, can you guess how much he is worth?
$300 billion.
Pretty close. Very close. So according to the latest figure from Forbes, he is worth $394 billion US
incredible amount of money.
An insane amount of money. Can you imagine what that is in Australian dollars?
A lot.
Definitely more. It's nearly, well, in US dollars at least, it is nearly $500 billion US dollars.
Wow.
It is beyond comprehension to try to understand how much money that is. But it's a lot. That is what we do know. Now, Musk was born in South Africa and he is the co-founder of SpaceX, which is a spacecraft manufacturer. He was also a key early contributor to the electronic payment platform PayPal. And he is also the CEO of electric vehicle company Tesla. I simply don't know how there are enough hours in the day to do all of that. But he also, in 2022, as I'm sure many of us remember, he bought Twitter for $44 billion, which he has since renamed to X.
Not to be confused with his child.
Yes.
Also named X.
Yes. He also co-founded a financial services company in like the 1990s that was called X.
There you go.
Big fan of the letter X.
Yep.
Now, fun fact, he actually also co-founded OpenAI, which is the maker of ChatGPT. But he left that board in 2018. And I thought I would include that because just last week, he put in a bid to buy OpenAI for $97 billion, but he was rejected.
Incredibly small circle of tech bros there. And seemingly Elon Musk has been involved with essentially every major technology disruptor across the board. It's quite incredible when you hear that.
Yeah, he's a very successful businessman.
Hence probably why he's the richest person in the world. But there you go. Okay, so putting aside the technology contribution for a moment now, because the reason that Musk is in the headlines so often is more recently about his foray into politics. I guess my first question is, has he always been as involved in politics as we understand him to be today?
Not at all. And interestingly, he also hasn't always been a Donald Trump supporter. Yeah. He has, through the years, donated to both the Democrats and the Republican Party, which are the two major parties in the US. So he's kind of dabbled in both.
Which is quite a common thing for wealthier, more influential people to do, because it means that you've kind of got the ear of whichever government takes office.
Exactly, because you're often trying to kind of win their
Hedge
support.
your bets.
Yes, exactly. But it's only recently that he has gone really hard on the Republican Party, or more specifically Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Because actually in 2016, when Donald Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, Elon Musk supported Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, wow.
But that was nearly 9 years ago now. And clearly he has gone on a journey since then. And
that's one way to put it.
Yeah. And in the 2024 election, he was obviously very vocal in his endorsement and support of Trump, which led him to being announced as the leader of a new government advisory body created by Trump called the Department of Government Efficiency, also known as Doge. Don't be fooled by its name, despite it being called a department. It's not. It's just an advisory body. And I mentioned the name that it's more commonly referred to as, which is Doge. And that is, of course, a reference to a cryptocurrency called Dogecoin.
Yeah.
Now, Musk was initially co-leading this with biotech billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy, But then he actually quit just hours after Trump became president. And there were reports that it was because of a clash between himself and Elon Musk, but nothing was confirmed, although, given the fact that he did quit, would suggest that something went wrong. And now Musk is the sole leader of that advisory body.
So Elon Musk is the sole leader of this new department, otherwise known as Doge. And it's both a new role and a new advisory group per se. What is its purpose? What is it designed to actually do? I guess, what is Elon Musk's job here?
So when it was first announced, Trump said that the department's goal was to, quote, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies. So essentially the goal is to significantly cut costs to the federal budget and to get rid of wasteful spending, what they deem to be wasteful spending.
Yeah.
So to give you context, the US is in more than $30 trillion of debt, and the Doge's aim is to reduce that debt significantly by reducing the government's spending.
Yeah.
And Musk says that if he doesn't do that, or if Doge doesn't do that, the country will go bankrupt. So he's saying this isn't an option. This is absolutely necessary.
I do think it's important to note there that a majority of countries across the world do have debt.
Large majority, if not every country.
Yeah.
But that sounds like an explainer for another day
It
about
does
why
indeed.
countries are all in debt. But back to this. Now, Musk initially said that he would be able to save about $2 trillion a year, which represents about 30% of the US government's total spend in a year. Since he initially said that $2 trillion figure, he has said that maybe that was a bit ambitious and they won't actually be able to reach that. But it remains the goal to cut $2 trillion of spending.
A stretch
a
goal.
Yeah. So just to put it really simply again, Elon Musk's entire role in the White House is to cut spending.
Okay. And how does Elon Musk plan to do that?
Hi, I'm Ola.
And I'm Elliot.
We're the two-person team behind everything video and audio here at the Daily Aus.
If you want to help us grow so we can deliver more of the content that you love, be sure to hit subscribe.
Now let's get back to the video.
So there's several different ways. I'm just going to go through a couple of them that have kind of gained the most attention. One way is by significantly reducing the federal workforce, also known as the public service, which is the country's largest employer. So this would mean cutting spending in different departments. Think of things like the Department of Education, the Department of Health, those kinds of things. And they want to cut jobs in those departments. So just last week, Trump signed an executive order directing agency officials to plan for, quote, large-scale reductions in their workforces. And it also stated that each agency, quote, hire no more than one employee for every 4 employees that depart. So that's basically a hiring freeze for the most part. And they're saying you cannot hire anyone else in any of the agencies unless you get rid of 4 people who are already in the room. They have also said that no hiring decisions can be made without consultation with a Doge team lead.
Wow.
So this is incredible oversight over every single hiring and firing that happens in every single government agency in the US. And for context, it was right after Trump signed this executive order that he and Musk did a press conference on the decision. And he said that they have found billions of dollars of waste happening in the US government's budgets. And just days after that happened, it was reported that termination emails had started being sent out to government workers, mostly those who are still on probation. Now, that alone could affect hundreds of thousands of workers, but it's expected to be only the beginning of large-scale reductions.
It's really interesting. I lived in DC, and so I've got quite a few friends who are still there. And on Instagram, I saw a number of them talking about the fact that they'd lost their jobs in recent weeks. And, as you said, it was this almost instantaneous thing that it was announced and then it happened. It's quite remarkable to watch. Now, Billi, I also remember reading a lot this week about US aid. In the US, it's called USAID. Outside, we tend to call it USAID, so whichever one you prefer. But can you just talk me through whether Elon Musk is involved with the reports I've seen this week about USAID?
Yeah, he's completely involved and leading the initiative to basically shut down USAID. So this is just another way that they're planning to cut spending is by shutting down the US's aid agency, which is called USAID. So for those not familiar, USAID was set up to administer humanitarian aid programs on behalf of the US government. So it does things like help provide aid such as food in countries where there is famine. Also, when there are disasters in countries, it also typically helps with that. Here's what Elon Musk said when he was asked why he was cutting it.
I think that there are some worthy things, but overall, if you say what was the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
It hires thousands of workers, and not just in the US, but in countries all over the world. And so now the large majority of those workers are at risk of losing their job. I do want to note that a judge has temporarily halted anything happening on this front for about a week whilst they make a final decision. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But at this stage, we know that Doge is basically wanting to completely shut down USAID. We just have to wait and see what happens in the courts.
Yeah. One of those interesting examples of how the judiciary and the executive are interacting at a time like this. Billi, in the office the other day, one of our team members said that there was an expiry date to Doge, that Elon Musk doesn't just have this free reign, that actually he is on a short-term contract, if you were to put it that way. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's two things to this about there being like a potential expiry date to Doge. So the first is that in Trump's executive order, which I mentioned earlier, that established Doge, it said that the temporary organization of Doge will end on the 4th of July 2026. So that's still a year and a bit to complete what it says its aim is. But even sooner than that, Musk is technically serving under Trump as something that is called a special government employee. And that is just a specific category of temporary workers in the government, and they can only work for the federal government for 130 days. So there is an expiry on Musk's official involvement in the White House. I guess we'll have to wait and see as to what that looks like if he will stop working.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to consider that happening now given how involved he is.
Yeah. Also, one thing that I've heard people asking in our comment sections is whether or not he gets paid for this.
Yeah.
He does not.
Oh.
Man doesn't need a buck.
True. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Did you think he was getting paid?
I don't think I'd ever really thought about it that
fair.
much.
Well, now that you have,
but I
he's
guess
not.
money doesn't really matter to him a whole lot. Before we end, I do want to turn to some of the criticisms of Doge, because there are a lot of criticisms. They are quite varied. They are from different parts of society. Can you just walk us through what that opposition looks like?
Yeah, like you said, there is quite a lot of criticism about Doge. One is that there is concern that Musk is acting without transparency. He disputes that. He says he is being very transparent, but you know, there is a lot of criticism around that. There's also concern about how much information Musk now has access to, despite the fact that he is an unelected official.
I think that's the big thing that is coming out, that he wasn't elected by the people, but yet he has so much power.
Yeah, I mean, it fit like the fact that he's holding these press conferences with the president. It feels like kind of at times like they're co-presidents.
Yeah, like he's the vice president or something.
There's also concern that there's a conflict of interest, given that Musk runs companies that have contracts with the government that are worth billions of dollars, and also that he could potentially be gaining access to federal contracts that the government has with his competitors. Beyond that, there is also a lot of criticism about what something like shutting down USAID could mean for the populations of countries who really rely on that funding to live and oftentimes to survive. The New York Times last week reported that already the collapse of USAID is causing really big holes in things like healthcare for locals in Africa. And there are quotes from locals there saying that they are just in disbelief about what this will mean for them and for their future and for the region more broadly.
Clearly that quote goes to the fact that America here isn't acting in isolation, and that the decisions that are happening internally are then affecting other countries around the world. Just bringing it back to Australia to end with, we have seen opposition leader Peter Dutton announce his own version of Doge here in Australia. It was in a shadow cabinet reshuffle a few weeks ago, but I don't think we covered it on this podcast. What happened?
Okay, so for context, we have an election coming up in Australia, and that means that opposition leader Peter Dutton is kind of
Prepping
and starting to tell Australia what he would do if he was the Prime Minister and elected. And he has created this new role that's called the Shadow Minister for Government Efficiency. Now, that sounds quite similar to the Department of Government Efficiency that Donald Trump created for Elon Musk. Now, Dutton has denied that he was inspired by Trump, so he says that they're not similar. But in terms of what they are designed to do, what Dutton has said that his shadow portfolio is designed to do, it is similar. It is dedicated to achieving a more efficient use of taxpayers' money. Those are his words. And in terms of who would be leading that, it would be Jacinta Price. So that means that at the moment she is the Shadow Minister for Government Efficiency, and presumably if the coalition is elected, she would then become the Minister for Government Efficiency. Now, in terms of why he says that this is needed, it is because he says that the Labor government's spending is wasteful and out of control. And Price also said that the current government spending had contributed to high inflation and also the broader cost of living crisis. So there's a lot there. I think despite the fact that Dutton is denying that he was inspired by Trump, there are some parallels that we can potentially draw. And as always, it's one to keep an eye on and one that the Daily Aus will keep you informed about.